Hi, it's Chris Grimm, and this is Deep Work Fast. Every week, for 20 minutes or less, I bring you tools, ideas, and concepts to do the deep work on yourself as quickly as possible. Because when you're ready, why wait? And you don't have to wait for a coach because I'm here and I'm coaching you. So I want you to be the best you can be in all the roles that you play at work and at home: parent, boss, coworker, employee, partner, daughter, son, all of them. Let's go. This is part 3 in a series, and I'm tackling how to live a life free of emotional baggage and old resentments. I've been talking, if you watched the other two, if you haven't, you might want to check those out. But today I just want to start off by saying, here's what I mean. Most people don't know how to completely resolve situations. Sometimes that's because we don't have time or we don't take the time to do it. Or what happens is that if situations are highly uncomfortable or we don't have the power in a relationship, so let's say we have a big old disagreement with our boss and you feel like, okay, they have more power than me, you're only going to push so much. Chances are that situation is going to move forward and you might not like the way the decisions were made or what happened in that situation. It happens with parents and children all the time. It happens with partners all the time. Think about it, right? Like, we are moving fast through life, and oftentimes we have to move forward, and we don't always have time to get full consensus. We don't have time for everybody to be happy. We have to compromise. Sometimes we have to vote. Think about that, right? There's winners and losers when we vote. So that's what I mean. Our life is full of situations that we wish would have gone different. And because of that, there's what I call residue, and oftentimes in our relationships and in our body, because our bodies hold unresolved stuff. If we don't get to speak our truth, or if we have to reject our own truth so that we can people please or do what the group wants or whatever the situation is, our body's probably holding that. And then it influences our current and our future interactions with people, even if they're different people, even if you have a different boss. You're going to carry that stuff until you resolve it. And most of us don't learn in our homes how to completely resolve. In fact, in most people's families, at least historically, I don't know what's happening in yours, but most families not only don't learn how to resolve conflict or things that never turn into a conflict, they're just a decision made or things that are happening and we don't feel happy about it. We don't not only learn how to resolve those, we usually learn from our family how to either work around it, how to be passive aggressive about it, be skeptical, cynical, talk about it 10 years later, hold it in, hold grudges, right? That's usually normal in people's families. And I want us to be better than that. So this week I want to talk about the 3 levels of work we do in coaching, and I'm going to invite you to do it. You can do it by yourself or you can do it with help. But what it takes to actually clean up that residue. And the first level, of course, is you taking time to reflect and become aware of what the signs are that you have in your mental, physical, and emotional health and awareness, right? Like, what's happening in your life right now that are signs that you have stuff that's unresolved. So if you're angry all the time, most likely that is an obvious sign that you got stuff on the inside that's not great. And most likely you're projecting old anger into current situations if you're a person that overreacts on a regular basis. So I want to track that and give you some questions to ask yourself when you have time to reflect on this. And like I said, you can do this without a coach. The first question is, what normally triggers you? So in coaching, I spend a lot of time with people trying to get to know what your triggers are. And a trigger is the thing that might take you from a state of calm, or at least a lower level of anxiety and stress, and triggers you up into a more intense feeling or agitation. And so I always am like, let's figure out your triggers. So sometimes a person can tell me, oh my gosh, I hate when somebody comes in to do a presentation in a meeting and they're chewing gum. Great. I'm not going to judge your triggers. Let's just write them down. So you should get used to that. You might also have triggers of like people who are late to meetings all the time. They're just chronic perpetrators. They're always late. They've always got an excuse for being late. And maybe you're the opposite of that. Maybe you're the on-time person, or maybe you're the person who's in charge of those meetings and you get annoyed because that person's late all the time. I want you to get all your triggers down. At home, you probably have triggers. Like, I know people who get mad when someone cuts something on the cutting board, leaves it out on the counter, and doesn't clean up the mess. I sometimes get triggered by that stuff, right? So we all have our things. Learn your triggers. Learn the triggers that at work and at home. Second thing is, how do you typically respond to conflict situations, right? So you have to think about, what is my normal response? And you need to do this when you're not agitated or angry. I want you to take an objective look at yourself. And if you need to, ask for some feedback, to ask people around you who you trust. They'll tell you. What do I typically do in a conflict situation? Like, what does it look like when I'm upset that other people are having conflict? I see that in coaching all the time. So maybe if you're a leader or a manager or a parent, you don't want the other people around you to fight. And so you may have a set of behaviors you use to avoid that, to stop it in its tracks, to force resolution, or at least you think you're forcing resolution, whatever those things are. Just know your style, write those down. The next thing is that what sensations do you feel in your body when you're in an argument? So you're an adult. You wouldn't be watching this, I don't think, if you weren't an adult. And if you're a young adult, you should learn this about yourself as early as possible. Most of us have what I call tell signs. Our tell signs, if you play poker, a tell sign is the thing that gives everybody the indication of whether you have good cards or not. There's probably more than that, but I'll just simplify it. So a tell sign around emotion and arguments is if you go into a situation and you are anticipating that there's going to be disagreement, that there's people in the room who aren't going to like what you have to say, you might come in nervous. You might come in overly prepared. You might fiddle with your pen or with your coffee cup or with your chair. I don't know. Everyone's got their things. You should know about yours. So I don't want you to think about other people right now, even though I'm sure you're thinking about other people right now. I want you to think about you and think about, what do I do? And then I want you to think about arguments. I want you to imagine in your head an old argument. It might make you upset, but it's a good exercise for you to start to understand, what do I do? Do you pace? Do you raise your voice? Do you lower your voice? Do you get faster in your speech pattern, or do you get slower? When I'm super duper mad, talk slower. And my children will tell you, I'm thinking about what I'm saying, and they know that is bad news when I start to talk slow and low. There's going to be an eruption. You have a version of this story too, and you should know what it is. And you should know if there's a difference in the way you handle it at work and the way you handle it at home. And the reason this is important is because, remember, we're tackling baggage here and old resentments and residue. So the reason these two things are connected is because most likely you also have the way you behave and how it feels in your body when you lose an argument or you think you've lost an argument. And for some people, that may mean having to compromise. Believe it or not, we each have beliefs. Some people are highly competitive and they want their ideas and recommendations to be the ones that win every time. And so they're super prepared, they make the presentation, and maybe the executives say no. And the ego gets bruised and you have all of these feelings. Maybe you're embarrassed, maybe you're upset. You should know, how do you handle it first in your body and then in the room when you don't get what you want? You should know what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like, because most of the time, those are the situations where when we leave that meeting or we leave that dinner, whatever it is, and we're holding now animosity, bitterness, resentment, anger, sadness, guilt, shame, whatever the emotion is that you feel when you don't get your way or something happens that you didn't expect and you feel like it was bad or that you're losing something, right? You need to know what that is. You need to know your patterns, and you need to start to think about where those patterns kind of came from, right? It may be that in my blog, I used an example because I had a client tell me one day that they realized that every time their wife got super duper angry, she would storm out of the room and door slam. And he was telling me this story, you know who you are, and he was saying that that felt normal to him because he came from a home of door slammers. And so to him, people get angry, they storm out of the room, they slam the door. All of that felt normal to him. And then he started to realize the more work we were doing that, oh, wow, that's not necessarily normal behavior. It was just the behavior he was comfortable with. So even though he didn't like that his wife was doing that, it was okay with him. He could live with it in his comfort zone because his mom did it, or his sister did it, or his people in his life did it, right? So that's what happens. We learn all of these patterns, of course, in our family of origin. And they come with us into our adult life. Some of those things are fine, like maybe they never really do anything bad, but some of those things we should be outgrowing, right? Like we should see them. We should reflect on it. We should know how they're showing up. And in some cases, we may have been in situations in our childhood homes that was super dysfunctional. And maybe we've brought that into our life and our work, and it's hurting you, right? Like maybe you are codependent, or you're putting up with behaviors with other people that really aren't great. Maybe they're bad. Maybe it's toxic. And you wonder, why do I stay in this place? Why do I continue to be in the same situation and have the same conflict over and over with people? Most likely, it's old stuff. Okay, another question that you need to ask yourself is, are there any memories or flashbacks from situations that are months or years old that you wish you would have done something different? Okay, that is a sign that you don't have resolution, right? So when old stuff comes back, and sometimes you're just on a plane, right? Like, and you're sitting there and something reminds you and you replay an old situation in your head and those emotions come back. And so I just want to say to you is when we have memories that still evoke emotion, but specifically uncomfortable emotions, it means you've got some cleanup to do and you may need help doing it. So my second level of that, of the cleanup, is learning to communicate and actively listen. Now, believe it or not, sometimes we can't forgive and forget. And sometimes we can't just easily walk away from situations if we want to have a peaceful, harmonious relationship with the same people. So remember earlier, I used the example that you could have a situation with your boss where you don't get what you want and you have to kind of get over it because the boss made a decision and you don't like it and it feels bad. Well, you still have to have a productive relationship with that person. So in coaching, I work on this a lot, helping you. So I'm going to talk to you right now because right now I'm not coaching your boss, I'm coaching you, which is learning to articulate the narrative behind what you feel bad about. So being able to speak truth in a productive way, not in a way that's charged. And what I mean by that is when we bring the old yucky emotions into the room and we project them onto the other people, most of the time it does not get us a better outcome. And so I spend a lot of time helping people kind of unpack the story. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. I wish they shouldn't have done this. XYZ, whatever the story is, we unpack it. And what I mean by that is we say, okay, what are the facts? What is the information around what actually triggered you, or why are you still thinking about this? What is the emotions that it's bringing up for you? And can you articulate your concerns without it being an emotional experience? In other words, can you say you were angry without actually being angry? It takes practice to do that. That's why sometimes you need a coach or a therapist or someone super objective, not your spouse, not your boss, not HR sometimes. I don't know, depends. You've got to know. You got to know where it's safe to unpack that story. And then, if in fact you need to resolve the issue with the other person, and this is the part that doesn't happen very often. I've had to mediate. I know, right? We don't take the time and it doesn't feel safe. And often there's not like the ground rules and the permission to bring back an old situation for resolution. And most of the time people don't do that unless it's a big, ugly conflict. So I want you to be able to do this without it being big and ugly. I want you to resolve it as quickly as possible. So if something feels sticky to you, maybe it was just a few days ago, it was a phone call, and after the phone call felt bad to you. Like that did not go the way it planned. I don't think our next conversation is going to go that well. And I need to speak truth to this person. I need to tell them that what they said or how they handled it, that did not go well. And it's sticking with me. And you should be able to speak that truth without expecting the other person to do anything. You didn't know that was coming, did you? And that's why sometimes it also takes active listening, allowing the other person to advocate for him or herself. Once they hear that you're having trouble kind of getting over that thing and you're holding some resentment or you're holding on that and it doesn't feel right to you, you getting it out should be your first goal. Just clearly, without blaming, without making them feel bad, and then giving them the space to just say what they need to say. And then you being able to actively listen to do that. Like I said, sometimes I have to facilitate these because it's really hard for most people to do it naturally. And it takes practice. So I just want to say to you, what I'm saying isn't necessarily easy or everybody will be doing it all the time. But I will also tell you that sometimes we have a fear about the resolution of issues in conflict. And sometimes that fear is unfounded. Like we are making it bigger because it feels bad to us. And so the story in our head about the other person and about our inability to resolve this thing, sometimes that's a fairy tale. Like that's just us being afraid. And it's not actually what happens in real life. I know many, many times, and if I've coached you, you know that this is true. When I have helped people go back and resolve issues, usually they're like, what a relief. And that person didn't react the way I thought they would at all. And now I can move on from that thing. So anyway, I want you to try it. The last thing is having some strategies that help you actually resolve the issue. And so I will say to you, a strategy is maybe knowing what compromise looks and feels like. There's a whole bunch of strategies around conflict resolution and many, many tools out there in great books. Crucial Conversations is one of them. There are a whole bunch of other books. I'll put them in the chat. I'll give you some resources, but it doesn't take a lot for you to go to Amazon and find a book that has negotiation, compromise, and conflict resolution tools. And many of those tools are not tools that you probably learned in your home. And so now is the time. And don't wait for a big, ugly thing to happen again before you get these tools. You want to learn them while you're doing cleanup and in a time where you don't have a lot going on, if that's possible. And I'm happy to help you if you need help. You know where to find me. I am here every Tuesday, but this topic is near and dear to my heart because honestly, if we could all just clean up the residue from all the old stuff, well, it would save you time. It would save you a lot of energy. And I promise it would make your future interactions with people a lot better because your awareness around what triggers you and what might create more resentment or residue, well, you'll avoid that. You will actually use the tools instead of allowing it to turn out into something more baggage for you to carry. Who needs more baggage to carry? Let's get rid of it. Okay, have a great day, and I'll see you next week.